Hey, everybody, this is Kelly Nielsen, the Grief Guru. And in this session, we're going to be exploring and discussing the difference between support and recovery as it relates to losing a loved one and moving forward in your life. So, as I mentioned, I am the Grief Guru. And as I like to share with folks, nobody grows up wanting to be the Grief Guru, but life, in my instance, just like in your instance, had other plans for me. My journey with grief began when I lost my mom to suicide a little over 5 years ago. That was a traumatic, devastating blow to our family. Our family honestly hasn't fully recovered as a family unit since then. But for me personally, it was a crisis in my life. I was bombarded by grief. I was swept out to sea by those grief waves that come at us, and I had a really difficult time trying to find my way. I actually looked for support and recovery and didn't find very many helpful tools. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to speak about this topic today specifically, because there is a difference between support and recovery. And I think all of us naturally look for support, and we probably have support offered to us. But there's a time and a place when our support needs to transition into recovery. And I'm so passionate about it because that's what I found in my own experience. When my mom passed away, I didn't get a lot of support or recovery from anyone until eventually I was invited to a suicide support group. I attended that group, and while I was thrilled to be in a room full of people who got it, people who understood what I was going through, this tremendous, intense pain that I was experiencing, I was in a room full of people who understood my pain. And that was helpful and comforting. The downside of that is everybody else in the room that day were experiencing the same level of devastation and pain that I was experiencing, except for they had been going down this journey months or even years. They had all lost their loved ones a long time ago, and they still appeared to be in the same condition that I was, even though I was only a few weeks out from losing my mom. So I left that group horrified, honestly, that this was the state of my existence, that this was just going to be my lot in life. These were the only people that I had met or encountered who had gone through the same thing I went through. And they were not doing well. They were barely, I wouldn't even call it living, they were surviving. So I began to believe that that's just what it was going to be. I just was going to exist in this sad state for the rest of my life. And I did that for several months. I just kind of went through the motions, and maybe some of you are relating to what I'm saying. Maybe you're in that place right now that you're just going through the motions. You're just surviving one day at a time, and you don't really have a hope for a better future. I did that for several months until, thankfully, in my story, I encountered a woman who had survived the Rwandan genocide, and she had recovered. So here I was faced with a woman who had gone through something bigger than what I was facing. She lost her entire family and virtually everyone she knew through this genocide that happened in Rwanda. And she shared her story, not only of trauma and tragedy, but of healing and recovery. And I saw for the first time a woman who had done it. And for me, that was enough to say, that's what I want. It was enough to show me that recovery was possible, that getting to a place where you're active and present in your life and looking forward to your future. I saw a woman doing that. So I decided right then and there that I would recover. Now, I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how long it was going to take. I just knew that it was available and it was for me. And so that's when I started to study and implement. I just started to pay attention to how I was feeling, how things were affecting me. I also started diving into two things: God's word, the Bible, and also neuroscience. I started learning about neuroscience and what happens to our minds and bodies when we experience grief and loss and trauma. And I started making subtle tweaks, and I started practicing some skills, and I started implementing some new things, and I started to feel better. And this is the beginning of our lesson about the difference of support versus recovery. Support is necessary. Everybody needs support, especially initially. You're in shock, you're numb, you've had a trauma happen in your life, and you need support. Initially, you need people to just hold you up. But eventually, you have to transition to a place of wanting to embrace recovery so that you can learn to live going forward, so that you can tend to and heal the wounds that have happened inside, all of the ways that you've been hurt and damaged, and process the loss. Actually process the loss and intellectually understand the loss that has happened in your life so that you can begin to make decisions for a brighter and healthy future. That is recovery. The analogy I like to use for folks is, imagine if you broke your ankle or broke your leg. You know, there would be a season you would initially need support. You would need a cast and crutches to literally do the work for you. That to me is what support is. It's just someone else coming alongside and doing the work for you. You, as the person who's been injured, are not really in an active state at this point. You're more at a restful, healing state. You're just sitting still because your body is not prepared to re-engage. But at some point, in the case of a broken leg, you're going to go back to the doctor and they're going to take that cast off. And you're probably still going to use your crutches for a little bit, but they're going to engage you in physical therapy. And you're going to be forced to move those muscles again and begin to put weight on your leg. And no, you're not going to run instantly. You're going to slowly, methodically increase the amount of weight that you put on the leg. You're going to do exercises, and you're going to need to do them repetitiously. You're going to have some consistency and some repetition in order to rehabilitate your leg, in order to be able to walk and run like you could before the injury happened. Grief recovery is no different. It's exactly the same. Our minds and bodies and hearts have been through a trauma. They've been damaged, and very real pain and damage has happened. We're not here to minimize or mitigate or pretend that the pain didn't happen. What we are here to do is address it and restore it and engage it so that you can move through it and learn how to live life going forward. So I often say that I'm basically, a physical therapist. I'm the physical therapy person for grief recovery. And I understand that this message isn't for everyone. I understand that depending on where you are in your grief recovery journey, or even your own individual temperament, this idea of recovery may not be for you. And if so, that's okay. I just want to encourage and bless everybody watching that your journey is your own, and you alone will bear the consequences of how you handle your journey, good or bad. So there's zero judgment here. If you're in a place where you're still wanting and needing support, and that you just acknowledge that's where you're at, then by all means, look for support, get the support. I just want to encourage you that support doesn't always equal healing and recovery. Often, and far too often, in my opinion, I see people who receive support and they stay stuck in that supportive place. They have people to hear their pain. They have people to help them with life, and they never kind of get back to living their own life and being in an empowered place. And so it's just a cautionary tale. If you find yourself in the support camp, how long have you been hanging out there, and how recovered are you feeling? And for those of you, for my friends who are ready for recovery, for the ones who maybe have been through their season of support, whether it's been a short amount of time or a long amount of time, but you decide that you're ready for recovery, you're ready to do the work that it takes to learn the skills and to put in the practice to actually recover from this loss and design a life that you want to live going forward, and have some help in doing that, then the rest of this message is for you. Recovery, we want to talk about what it is and what it isn't. So recovery, to me, is very action-oriented. Where support is dependent on other people and you're fairly inactive, recovery is the opposite. It's you taking responsibility, accountability, and radical action in order to move through this healing process, this recovery process. Just like if you broke your leg, as I said, you'd have to do exercises. Some of it would be painful. Some of it might be inconvenient. You may feel like you're repeating things more than are necessary, but all of that is intentional for the healing of your leg. And we approach grief recovery exactly the same way. There are things that you can do on a consistent basis that are going to dramatically help you to move through this loss and get back to living your life. And there are things that you need to do consistently and things that may or may not make sense for you, things that may be painful and feel awkward and uncomfortable. It's all very similar to physical recovery. But so the first component of recovery is that it's action oriented. It's also future focused. You know, we do spend some time in recovery talking about the loss for the sake of coming to terms with the loss and coming to a place of understanding about it. But the recovery work is not really rehashing the loss or reliving it. In fact, we teach people how to direct their thinking and how to redirect their thinking if they find themselves getting stuck ruminating or meditating on the loss. So recovery is very action oriented and it's future focused. It's taking a look at how you're going to live your life going forward and how you need to be equipped in order to live your life going forward in a way that is healthy and whole and meaningful for you. Those are a couple of components about recovery. The other thing about recovery is that there is support in the midst of recovery. So you can be supportive, but it isn't a support place. So for myself, when I'm helping people move through this process, I'm going to be supportive as you have a tough day and as you grapple with some of these concepts and as you're practicing and learning new skills, but it isn't a place to just stay and stay stuck and wallow. That's kind of the difference there. So for those of you that are ready for recovery, we've talked about what recovery looks like, but what does it look like specifically with grief and specifically our grief relief program? Now, for the sake of time and for the sake of not wanting to overwhelm you, I'm going to give you a very high-level overview of our grief relief program. It's a 5-pillar program that we use with people. But whether you adopt or embrace our program or not, I want everyone that's watching to really make a determination for yourself. Where are you on this grief relief recovery continuum? Are you on the support side of things? Are you ready for the recovery, but you don't know what that looks like? Or maybe you are on your path to recovery. But knowing where you are is a huge advantage in knowing where you want to go. You know, you can't determine where you want to go and start making plans until you first know where you are. So that's a quick nugget for everybody to check in with yourself. Where are you? And for those of you that are ready for recovery or are curious what that looks like, I can tell you what that looks like with us. So we help folks walk through what we call our grief relief program, which are all recovery mindsets, skills, and tools that you practice and learn with the accountability of a coach or other people to become proficient and skilled in. So the first step in our grief relief program is what we call our map maker. That's where we help you to take the time and go through the process to determine what you believe and what you want for your life. Now, those are easy questions to say, but they're hard questions to answer. There's a lot of work and processing that goes to get clarity on those two things in order to move forward. The second step is what we call our path protector. That is where we work with you to determine in your entire life, and we take a rather exhaustive audit of everything in your life and help you to determine what do you need to reduce, what do you need to remove, and what do you need to increase during this recovery season so that you can facilitate your healing and recovery. The third step that we work with people is what we call our mindful makeover. That's where we teach you all of the little brain hacks that I learned through neuroscience. You learn the skills for dealing with the overwhelming thoughts and emotions that come with grief and grieving. There are some things that you're going to learn to do intentionally, consistently beforehand that are going to help to reduce and minimize the amount of grief waves you experience. But then you're also going to have a skill set and a toolbox for when they do happen so that you can handle them effectively and not be blindsided or debilitated as much by those triggers or grief waves. Our step 4 is what we call community collaborator, which in a nutshell just helps to connect you to positive, healthy community that's going to help you in your recovery journey and also take some inventory and stock about how your existing relationships have been affected by the grief and loss and what you want to do about that. Then the last and final step, which is my favorite step, step 5, is what we call finding a purpose for your pain. We help you to recognize the ways that you have been individually made better, stronger, more empathetic, more appreciative, whatever it looks like for you. How have you been changed for the better by going through this process? And then lastly, what are you going to do going forward to honor your loved one, to remember them in an intentional way, celebrate them in an intentional way, and create a legacy for them in the world? How can you use everything that they were and to you and the people around you, and how you've been changed by their life and by their passing? And what can you do to make an impact in somebody else's life? This is such a beautiful thing. This is the part of loss that you will be doing for the rest of your life. And it's my favorite part of helping people explore and discover amazing ways that they want to honor their loved ones going forward. This really, more than anything, is the magical spot of where you stop looking backwards with sorrow and you start looking forwards with anticipation. I love, love, love helping people figure out what that looks like. So that is a very high level of our 5-step framework, how over at the Grief Guru, how we work with people to help them move through grief and loss. But my hope for you today, the biggest takeaways I'm hoping that you have from our chat and our time together, is just understanding the difference between support and recovery, maybe taking some honest inventory and stock on where you're at and what you're needing right now in this season. Is it support, or are you ready for recovery? And to take a look at, if you are receiving support around you, is that support helping you to recover, or do you find that you're kind of stuck in the process? There's no right or wrong answers. This is your journey and your timeline. I'm just here to empower and equip you to make choices that honor and serve you. As always, all of us at Grief Guru are cheering you on in your grief recovery journey. Thanks so much for your time.